Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here representing Jason Blaha Strength and Fitness, and today I want to chat with you guys and gals a little bit about one of the perks of training a lift really frequently. But a quick reminder, if you guys will please click like down below, be greatly appreciated. If you're not subscribed or following, please do so. And if you'll be kind enough to drop me a comment down below, I would appreciate it so much. And I think when we do this, I do want to note we need to be careful with workloads. Okay, when you're talking big barbell lifts, this is one of those areas of nuance to where I've said before, if you're not really careful with high frequency training, I've seen it literally cripple lifters and knock them out of the game way younger than me. All right, so we need to be aware when I make this discussion. When I make this discussion, we have to be looking at stuff like, are you maintaining good form? Okay, if you're going to bench or squat or whatever 3 times a week and you're not a novice, let's say you're going to do a full body with these things 3 times a week. You're going to go for this higher exposure. You can't be doing silly stuff. You have to be careful with your total loading. You need to make sure that your diet is on point. This is, I think, a big one. Inflammation needs to be controlled. You got to watch closely for overuse. In other words, you can't be grinding lots of reps. You need to be able to maintain good form, and a lot of it needs to be rep work, right? In other words, I don't recommend you come in and just keep beating away with grinders and things. And I think that's something that even the Bulgarian stuff, the people who do Bulgarian light figured out really quick. They have to be training maxes. Okay, they have to be training maxes. You can't come in and hit a max all the time over and over with it grinding on the max, right? It needs to be fairly clean with good technique, not psyched up. Okay, but the same thing when we come to some of our rep work on it. Just be aware that overuse can occur if you're not pretty careful. And I think this is where when we go to higher frequency, you need to be aware of your supplemental work. This is the case of where you have to go, how much supplemental stuff am I going to do? Am I really going to do any isolation or anything that's going to put wear and tear on tendons at those angles? Now, that aside, that word of caution in there, let's talk about the perks of it. All right, higher frequency training is going to train neural drive. And I think this is something that we have to think of from a hypertrophic component. When you are good at a lift, you have good technique, good efficiency, you're good at recruiting all the muscle fibers concurrently. So this higher frequency, notice I'm not talking about a curl. I'm talking about a bench press. I'm talking about a squat. I'm talking about an overhead press, right? I'm talking multi-joint exercises to which there is a skill component. And when people hear that, they're like, oh, it's not a high degree skill. It's a coordination skill. In other words, the ability to instantly turn on all the muscles at the same time and actualize them efficiently is a skill, right? You have to understand that. Your ability to overhead press, for example, and have all of the muscles fire concurrently quickly and all at a high rate of force production, so getting to those upper threshold and fast twitch fibers immediately, that's a skill, to do them all at the same time in every muscle. So this is what we see, even when you look at EMGs, the muscle activation is really high on, say, a competitive power lifter when they hook EMGs up, and that's why they can't tell whether it's a chest or a tricep exercise or anything else when grip changes in power lifters. Why? Because of high neural drive. So think about this high neural drive from the skill component of practicing the same lifts over and over. If we're going to talk the ability to progressively overload a movement, see where I'm going? If you have 4 exercises that you do 3 days a week in a full body type workout, you're being repeatedly exposed to that skill. You're going to get really good at that movement. Now, people say, well, if you're really efficient, you're going to get less progress. No, not necessarily. Not at all, because you're going to move more weight for the same number of reps. You're going to be able to do more reps more quickly. It's going to let you progressively overload it more effectively. So in the grand scheme of things, yes, that progression is going to have the potential for more muscle growth. But we also need to be clear that when we say this, it's not going to be massive, right? I don't want people to hear me say that and say, so you're saying that, if I did a pull up 3 times a week instead of a pull up, a barbell row, and a dumbbell row, that it's going to be a massive. No, it's going to be very small, because that extra progression from the skill is going to be a fairly subtle amount. And that subtle amount is going to be a very small increase in muscle growth. But if we're really going to talk about, fine tuning it, people always say this silly stuff like, well, if I want to maximize my gains, well, you're probably not going to maximize your gains. You're not going to optimize your gains. I always say, guys, make sure your recovery is on point before you can start thinking like that. Maximize your lifestyle, maximize your nutrition, your sleep, because you're not going to optimize your training otherwise. It's not going to do anything. It's not going to give you any extra growth if you're not recovering. But if we're going to have this conversation about optimizing, getting really good at the movements that you are using to grow with, in this case, let's say squat, bench, deadlift, pull up, right? Getting really, really good at them by frequent exposure is going to help you gain muscle, because you're going to be able to progressively overload them more effectively, right? Now, can it potentially come at the expense of higher overuse? Yes, and this is why I tell people, if you're going to do that sort of thing, you need to make sure you're picking versions of the lift that do not beat your joints up personally, right? Okay? This is why I say that, hey, if we're going to do something like this, you probably need to pause bench. Let's not touch and go. Let's get over to minimizing potential issues like that. Okay, you want to minimize those issues. So again, you're going to have to be very careful how much supplemental work you throw in for those same tendons and joints. You're going to have to listen to your body a little more. There is a downside, and I think that we have to be aware there's a balance to be had. That yes, technically hammering those same movements more frequently will have potential for more size, more strength. Also going to have potential for more overuse. Okay, so again, it's give and take. And as long as you're aware of that and you can watch for those signs and know when to back down, it will work. But a lot of people are not going to always watch for those signs. And so if they don't, it's going to become a problem. And this is another reason I also tell people, if you're going to take this approach of a higher frequency, you need to keep your psychological arousal lower. You need to have a calm approach to those lifts, because your form is going to be cleaner and you're going to beat your recovery up less on the nervous system and hormonal side if you're calm when you do them. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative. I'll talk to you guys and gals next time.